Professor Eisenschmidt, who works as a professor of educational leadership at Tallinn University School of Educational Sciences. And Professor Eisenschmidt has been very active in development of teacher education policy in Estonia. For instance, preparing the implementation of the induction program for beginning teachers competence framework, and developing initial teacher educational programs. But she has also worked as an expert evaluator of teacher education programs in different countries. So Professor Eisenschmidt will give us a short overview about the Estonian perspectives related to the emergency remote education during the COVID pandemic. So without further ado, please, Professor Eisenschmidt, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good morning. I was ready already like 1 hour before. So I'm really happy to present very briefly on behalf of our research group what we found out during first pandemic wave. As everybody almost, we also carried out research among our schools. And here are some results. Generally, we may say that Estonian schools and teachers coped well with the transition to the distance learning. But to find out what could explain successful transition and what were supporting factors, we used the resilience model to analyze particularly school leaders' data. So we looked from leaders' perspective how resilient Estonian schools are. Although resilience are more used for psychological characteristics, but in nowadays more and more this is also used for organizational as organizational characteristics, and to understand how flexibly and also how well actually organizations learn from turbulent situations. So there are like 4 elements. First, potential to anticipate, basically how well they are prepared, knowing what to expect. Then potential to respond, how flexibly and how they know what to do in critical situations, and also potential to monitor, to know what to look for, to understand what is actually happening and what to do best next. So the 4th element is potential to learn, knowing what has happened and and being able to learn from this experience. So first, what kind of early practices or teaching practices particularly predicted coping with leadership during distance learning period? Because we looked at the leadership perspective, we found that teachers' earlier use of digital learning materials and arrangement of independent learning days for students and collaboration with other teachers explained better coping and transition to distance learning period. But also earlier routines and habits to use data, which is very much in line with our keynote presenter, for decision-making, predicted also coping with leadership during distance learning period. So leaders who responded or reported that they used to use data for decision-making to set development goals for entire school and teacher professional development, also felt that they coped better. Actually, this exactly demonstrates or confirms that our school policy, current school policy, actually support schools behavior or respond to uncertain situations, because all schools in Estonia need to design their development plans at least for 3 years, and this is exactly school level activity where all staff members should be included. And also all schools need to carry out internal evaluation, and seems that we really can benefit from this quite demanding work during uncertain and turbulent times. But next, how well schools responded to the situation, and how flexibly and how they knew what to do. Exactly, joint discussions again and collaboration with parents predicted coping with leadership in uncertain situations, and also teachers discussions how to arrange learning process and to analyze. They analyzed feedback they collected from students and parents. And in addition, actually, finding from teachers' data also confirmed that these activities and teachers' autonomy to apply different teaching methods were crucial for successful experience of distance learning. And also collaboration between teachers, educational technologists and special educators was important for teachers to implement a variety of pedagogical methods and to support individual students. Teachers who collaborated with colleagues and parents more frequently applied also more diverse teaching practices in technology, use of technology, but also individual task-based teaching methods, and not only synchronous video lessons, but also differentiated learning and use different students-centered project-based teaching strategies. And again, joint discussions and habits to use data had impact for future, basically how influential was distance learning period for teachers and leaders to learn from this situation. They brought exactly out that discussions, planning together, analyzing what is going on, and also relying on data, not just discussing and believing or trusting gut feeling, but collecting data and relying on evidence. So we can conclude that collaboration and evidence are important in uncertain situations, and somehow also preconditions to manage in critical situations. And this is something what we can take with us and support our school development in future. So thank you from my side.
Thank you very much, Professor Eisenschmidt, for very interesting insights from Estonia. Very fascinating to hear that the data starts to play such a huge role also during the pandemic here. And we see that this kind of positive data imaginaries are created within schools, and the data-based governance is really already quite evident in Estonian schools as well. So for all of those who have questions to Eva, I ask you to write your questions in chat, because as I mentioned previously, we will go on with the presentations and then try to have a wider discussion based on these 5 presentations at the end of this session. So thank you once again, Professor Eisenschmidt, for your talk. And we will now move on to a next presentation and we hear from perspectives from Finland. And Dr. Minna Lakkala, who works as a postdoctoral researcher at the Technology in Education Research Group at the University of Helsinki, will join us and talk about experiences from Finland. And Dr. Lakkala has a background in general psychology and computer science and extensive experience of consultation and teacher training in educational use of ICT for more than 30 years. So, Dr. Lakkala, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. And I will share my presentation. So my presentation includes some recommendations about digital practices for schools based on some Finnish experiences. I review 2 studies shortly. First, about the situation in Finland. So in Finland, schools worked remotely between the middle of March and middle of May, so not very long time actually. And upper secondary schools continued remote teaching in the autumn. In comprehensive schools, individual teachers and students and classes worked remotely depending on the situation, but there was not so sort of major distance working period actually. Finnish Education Evaluation Center, who does various surveys about schools and teaching and education, they made a survey for municipality representatives and principals and teachers last autumn. And I picked from their study some good practices that they picked from the survey based on the COVID experiences. So this, I think, happened maybe in every country, that there was great improvement in both teachers and students' digital skills and abilities to use online tools especially. And these skills should be maintained also in the future, so not go back to earlier practices only. And one interesting detail was that teachers said that remote staff meetings turned out to be very handy, and they should be, because they increase possibilities to participate. Teachers are in different parts of schools and some are at home, so that is one concrete way of maintaining good practices based on the COVID experiences. Then use of digital learning methods, especially sort of digital learning platforms, turned out to be very useful, especially in upper secondary school, and this should be sort of continued. And also use of remote teaching for individualized learning and supporting self-regulation. And very useful also was to use remote meetings for study support and counseling in special situations, also for younger students, when students need to be at home and things like that, also after the forced corona situation. Then some researchers from the University of Tampere, Tanhua Piiroinen and her colleagues, made a study for tutor teachers in Finland. There's actually quite interesting tutor teacher model. It is not established yet fully, but the idea is to have a tutor teacher in every school who supports other teachers in pedagogical development and also in improving digital competencies and digital practices. And Tanhua Piiroinen and her colleagues, they made a survey for the tutor teachers, and they interviewed some coordinators. And here are some recommendations based on that study. So very important is to have organized digital and pedagogical support for schools, not just that there is some interested pilot teacher who helps others, but somehow systematically organized, like this tutor teacher model in Finland. And it's important to have even distribution of resources in national level. Maybe this is very strongly emphasized because Finnish education system is so strongly based on equality, and this forced remote teaching situation sort of revealed problems in this equality in these resources. And also important to have equal opportunities for all students to learn multiliteracy.
It is actually my great pleasure to introduce you to the next speaker, because we will start to hear experiences from Norway. And it is my very great pleasure to invite Ingvild Vikingsen Skogestad, who is working as a teacher at the Knappskog school in Norway, to share her experiences. And also, what I think is really important to add in this context is that Knappskog school is fully digital, which means that they have one-on-one coverage with digital units and digital technologies, and these are primarily used for teaching. So please, Ingvild, we look forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
As said, my name is Ingvild, and I'm a teacher, and it's a school for 6 to 12 years old people. And I'm going to talk about how the corona closure were at my school. In my school, first and second graders have iPads, and third to seventh graders have Chromebooks. So all our students have their own device. We focus on the educational classwork. So also before the corona situation, we thought that the educational classwork must be in the driving seat. So the digital devices is a tool for us. It's not the target or the goal. We use them in our educational classwork in the best way we can find. We put the student in the center, and we focus on the teacher to go from the sage on the stage to be the guide on the side. We want deep diving students that own their own learning experience, and we want creative students. So this is things that we worked with, we focused on before the corona closure. When the COVID came and we had the homeschool, remote learning, we actually had a plan for homeschool one day before. So we knew what to do when the remote learning started. And when the remote learning started, the 4th to 7th graders were already using Teams. So we didn't have to find some new tools to keep contact with our students. We already had the tool. But a week or two before the closure, the 3rd graders had been given the Chromebooks for the first time. Before that, they had iPads, so they didn't have anything. 1st to 2nd graders were using Shobi, and in the start of the corona, Shobi was only a writing, you can share thing writing, but you couldn't have actual meetings. So we used Teams, and we had the Teams installed in the homeschool period. And in the start, we actually just could install apps on the iPads on the school network. So we had the parents outside on the parking lot to install the app. And the 3rd graders, they just used what they could. So they used Hangouts or also the Google system. in the municipal, in the plan we had a daily or weekly schedule, so we didn't have the schedules at school, but we made a schedule. Today or this week the students are going to this, and then we checked on them. And the teachers from 4th to 7th grade, they were in contact with the students daily, both in class meetings and individually. Right now I have 4th grade, and they were in 2nd grade when this started. And for them, it was to be in a meeting and talk with the teachers, and they were just quiet. They had to have games to meet, to interact. So we found out that digital meeting is not the same as a classroom conversation. I really miss the dialogue. The pedagogy model we teach, it's like a dialogical pedagogic model. So I really missed the dialogue. And we also experienced that even we had the tools, it was difficult to ensure that everyone kept up. So actually when it were allowed to have some students at school, we also included some of the older students, because in Norway, when the youngest student could come back to school quite a lot weeks before the older students. But we saw that some of the older students had to come back before, because we didn't get the dialogue. We was afraid that we were losing them. So it was difficult to involve students who were at home alone. Students with parents were easy to follow, but the students that were alone was not that easy. We missed the close contact with students. We missed to see them and talk with them eye to eye, not talk to them in a screen. And we missed to do the fun stuff in class. We do a lot of coding, we do a lot of creative work with our hands. We tried to do that. I will show some pictures soon, but it wasn't the same. So, and when we came back, we had the strict rules, so we couldn't do the fun stuff then either. When we have to keep distance, and we missed the social interaction. But maybe I'm fun part, but the feedback, the students miss the feedback now when they are back to school, because when they were at home, the feedback was written. The teachers always gave feedback on the things they had done, and now we have to explain to our students that the oral feedback also is feedback. The digital feedback is also feedback. Feedback isn't only the thing that the teacher writes on the bottom on what they have done. Feedback is also when in a dialogue, when the teacher say, "Oh, that was great," or "Maybe you can do that." So we have used some times afterwards now to let them know that that's also feedback, because now they miss the feedback from the homeschool period. And here's a few pictures. The first picture is from swimming teaching. The 4th graders then went to swim once a week, and of course in the corona they couldn't go swimming. So then the teachers have the gloves and glasses on, and have the swimming lesson on the floor. And the second picture is from baking. They were baking sweet buns at home, and the teacher in the corner is showing in her kitchen how to bake. And we had to have some of this fun stuff, because weekly schedule, daily schedule, it worked fine. but school is boring without activity. School is boring without dialogue. So I think we had the framework. We knew what to do. We had the tools, but we missed dialogue and we missed the practical things and the social interacting. So that's a little bit from Knappskog School in Norway. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingvild. These were very interesting examples you brought, especially trying to teach swimming remotely. Of course, not the easiest of solutions for the teacher, but it seems that despite the hardships, everybody managed and will take a few pointers of how to move forward for sure. Thank you so much for your presentation. But we can now move on and hear about experiences from Georgia. And it's my honor to invite Professor Tamar Siradze, who's a Vice Rector and Professor of the Department of European Studies of Batumi, Shota, Rustaveli State University, and also a partner of the iHub project, to share their insights from Georgia's experiences. So please, Professor Siradze, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's nice to meet you all here and participate in this splendid webinar and make our contributions to the project. Today, I will talk about the learning process during the COVID pandemic, problems, challenges, and solutions in Georgian educational system. More specifically in the Ajara region, which is in the western part of Georgia. I have selected, together with other members of the project, the materials which we had from the Ministry of Education and Culture and Sport of Ajara, as well as other universities throughout Georgia. In March 2020, in response to the threat of the spread of the coronavirus, due to the situation in the world in general, including Georgia, preventive measures were taken by government agencies, which include the transition to distance learning and labor. In the first phase, the learning process was completely suspended until April 21, and then resumed online. And learning continued through the Teams and Zoom platforms. So these were two platforms, but mostly schools were using Teams platform for lessons. Distance learning has never been used in the Georgian education system before the pandemic. Consequently, the country was almost unprepared to meet the new reality. A number of problems have been revealed, including the following more generic ones, and now I will enumerate most of the problems. Socially vulnerable families could not attend online lessons due to the lack of computers and internet. Internet frequency was low in highland areas and villages of Ajara region, which was one of the hindering conditions for attending lessons. COVID pandemic has significantly reduced the number of students in private schools, thus making public schools more in demand. Difficulty of interaction between students and teachers, especially among first graders. And this problem, I think, goes in line with the problems of the previous speaker, Ingvild, if I'm not mistaken, just mentioned that they missed the dialogue, and we do agree with this problem as well. And this is what we included here as our problems as well. So difficulty of interaction between teachers and students. The problem of involving and attending classes with hyperactive students or students with special needs, and less involvement of parents in the online learning process due to their employment, busyness, or lack of digital technology skills, because parents are less developed maybe in technologies rather than their children. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Georgian government provided a variety of social assistance programs. Now I turn to the kind of solutions which we were trying to catch up with the problems, including utility subsidies, restructuring of bank loans, etc., etc. But it should be noted that one of the best practices is the prompt response from the public broadcasting television of Georgia and creation of the TV school, the so-called TV school. It means that during a week, specific timetables have been arranged like schools. It was kind of simulation of schools, and school children could attend appropriate lessons during the week on TV, and it was done actually brilliantly, we can say today. It has been so successful that still continues even after schooling has turned back to the face-to-face learning. The social assistance which was used to improve the education service included the following programs. One time 200 Georgian GEL social assistance to children. Learning materials for students, they were distributed free of charge. Preferential internet packages, we try to improve the internet access for the families, and general internet access and quality improvement. Public procurement in the education system. As you know, the public procurement is connected with quite a lot of bureaucratic process and procedure. So this time government tried to facilitate the process somehow and allow public schools to conduct procurement without any specific procedures. A tablet transfer program was launched for socially vulnerable families. COVID pandemic and the challenges of distance learning have shown that despite the existing problems, the rate of school leaving and enrollment in higher educational institutions was quite high, and still we had as many students becoming the students of higher educational institutions as before. At this stage, face-to-face teaching is underway in all schools of Georgia. As for the universities, most have renewed the new academic year in a hybrid format, which means conducting lectures online while the practical part is on site. I did not mention in details the developments at universities, but I would like to mention here that unlike schools, universities were more or less prepared for the pandemic situation, because prior to the pandemic situation, most of the universities in Georgia tried and managed to prepare platforms for the transfer of educational systems into electronic management. That is why they were more or less prepared to transfer all the teaching process onto the electronic platform without any problems. The Ministry of Education, Culture and Sports of Ajara has set up monitoring focus groups which check the progress of the educational process on a daily basis and issue recommendations in case of problems. Actually, this is all in brief about the main situation, general situation of educational system in Georgia. But my answer to the title question of the webinar, if COVID-19 is a catalyst for educational change, is yes, it is. It's accelerated the process of utilizing all the benefits of digital technologies, and I do think and hope that our project, I Have for Schools, can serve as another catalyst because all the benefits which is offered by this program, I think, will be very helpful for schools in Georgia to be more in collaboration with each other and not conduct everything only closely, independently, without any contacts to each other. Thank you for attention. This is what I wanted to talk about today.
Thank you so
Ready
much.
to answer the questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Siradze. It was very fascinating to hear how different digital divides were overcome, actually, and with a very fascinating and creative solution with TV schools. I think this is something that many countries can learn from, actually, and yeah. I hope we have more opportunities to discuss on the topic after the final presentation in this round. So once again, thank you so much for your presentation. And the final speaker for this slot will come from Lithuania. So it is my great pleasure to invite Vaidas Bacys, who is also the principal of the Dubysos school in Šiauliai district, and also a former Vice Minister of Education and Science in Lithuania, to share actually Lithuanian experiences. So please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone from cloudy Lithuania. I'm instead of Vaidas because things happened and he couldn't join us today. But this presentation we prepared together, so I'm going to share the things about how we survived the COVID situation and distant learning in Lithuania. So the COVID pandemic has had a major impact on the education and training systems in Lithuania, excluding the non-compulsory part of the curriculum. Each week of school closures represents about 22 hours of face-to-face compulsory instruction time at school. That is to say 2.7% of annual compulsory time, instruction time. Schools were forced to replace this time in class with online learning and homeschooling, in most cases facilitated by teachers and parents. From the 1st of September 2021, with the start of the new school year, the Lithuanian government has decreed, in accordance with the recommendations of Ministry of Education, Science and Sport, that the educational process for pupil who is unable to attend class due to isolation shall be continued in a hybrid, blended or distant mode, except when the pupil is ill. If the pupil is ill, the educational process shall not be organized for him or her. Hybrid education is organized when the school or classroom has the appropriate equipment and a few pupils in the class are in isolation rather than the whole class. With a small number of pupils in isolation, hybrid teaching can also be organized by providing video tutorials for pupils and assigning independent tasks. At the time we started the distance learning, teachers were ready to use online modules or learning materials available on the internet and learning management systems like Teams and Moodle, Canvas, Google Classroom, and Zoom as means of offline, online and distance learning education. The school has provided all supplementary materials and equipment for distance learning. Of course, we face some challenges. Distance learning in the face of COVID-19 has received a lot of attention and is leading to an increased workload for educators. In our school, we face some challenges like on knowledge and skills required in delivering distance learning educational classes, challenges on having stable internet access intended for distance learning education, challenges on use of phones, laptops, tablets, or any devices for distance learning education, challenges on time management in conduct of classes, monitoring on responses, availability of students, and other online issues. In Lithuania, the beginning of distant education highlighted the lack of teachers' experience in working with information technologies, lack of computer equipment and tool, and technical problems of distant education. Teachers, especially senior teachers, also face difficulties in managing information technology, including tools for distant education. The teachers with more number of teaching experience, number of years of teaching experience, needed more assistance in using with online tools to deliver their lessons. By 2021, more than 2,000 educators are planning to leave their job due to dramatic changes in their workload and the difficulty of adapting to distant and ever-changing teaching styles. What concerns about hybrid learning? Hybrid learning is a challenge in Lithuanian schools. There is a need for hybrid teaching, which is currently considered a challenge in Lithuanian schools for the following reasons, like lack of commitment, lack of adapted classrooms, and the need to improve teachers' competences in hybrid learning. On the other hand, the specificities of hybrid teaching can open new opportunities for education. For example, at the beginning of the pandemic, many people lacked digital literacy skills, but now these skills have been developed, which is a major achievement in the age of artificial intelligence and automation. Distant learning and hybrid learning can open up many more possibilities, like we can record a lesson or lecture, we can monitor learners' progress. It is now important to provide solutions for the use of hybrid learning in different disciplines, in different educational institutions, and for individuals of different maturity and socioeconomic levels. The National Agency of Education has purchased more than 1,800 mobile video recorders at a cost of 2 million and will distribute them to Lithuanian schools. Of course, the distant learning gave us more opportunities. We discovered lots of new things. School closures have forced many schools to think outside the box and come up with innovative and pragmatic solutions in order to deliver teaching and ensure learning can happen remotely. The COVID-19 situation has prompted teachers to rethink the educational process, to digitize tasks where possible, to look for new ways to work with students remotely and to involve every child. The school has created her own system of information dissemination to communicate with the parents and the learners during the COVID-19 outbreak. Furthermore, teachers have had the opportunity to attend seminars, workshops needed in offering distant learning education. This encouraged teachers to think outside the box. The COVID-19 situation has also led to the search for new forms of communication and the development of professional networks among teachers. For example, when the COVID-19 pandemic started and the schools in Lithuania were closed, many Lithuanian publishing houses, cultural institutions, libraries, museums opened up their educational resources for teachers to use. So we could find the new forms of communication to gain new experiences, and it's open for us new professional networks. So that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Vida, for taking the stand and telling us more about Lithuanian experiences.